Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome back to the Youth Factor, where we aim to see the world through the lens of the future. I'm your host, Alex Jung, and I hope to take you on a virtual journey around the world, where stories untold will be shared, current issues will be discussed, and the voices of the youth will be heard. This is the first episode exploring a country in the Caribbean Latin American region. This country is also the smallest country in Central America. This country has earned the nickname the Land of Volcanoes because it has more than 100 volcanoes, with around 20 of them still potentially active. A country with rich history, including the oldest capital city in Central America, as well as a history of resilient people following centuries of unfortunate colonial rule. With some of the best beach conditions for surfers to enjoy, world-famous coffee beans being the fourth largest coffee producers in the world, and archaeological gems such as pyramids proving insight into the Mayan Empire, there will always be a little something for everyone to enjoy. Today, we explore El Salvador, and joining me today is our guest host, Gervasio Abarca. Gervasio is a fellow alum from Chun United World Colleges in Hong Kong. His hobbies are to design, cook, and he's a self-proclaimed techno geek. He's passionate about medicine and plans to study biomedicine in the future. Welcome, Gervasio.
Hi, Alex.
Yeah. Could you please introduce
Hello.
yourself?
Yeah. First of all, it's great to be here. I think I'm really enjoyed to talk about my country. As you mentioned, I'm Gervasio Abarca from El Salvador. I'm 18 years old. I've been living in El Salvador since I was born. I born in El Salvador. I'm proudly Salvadorian. Until I was 16, I guess. I moved to Hong Kong to study. Then I came back and I'm going to the US. And yeah, some hobbies, as you mentioned, is just to design, make stuff, watch videos, and play video games.
Yeah.
Um, I'm here just to respond to whatever you want to know about El Salvador and uh, probably like clear your doubts.
Yeah, it's good. Gervasio is a great cook, by the way, as a person who has had Gervasio's food. It is always so lovely. And he's going to open a little restaurant in the future, so
Yeah,
look out for
yeah,
that.
I'm planning to open a coffee shop with some desserts and stuff. Like I like to cook, especially pasta.
Oh.
Alex knows.
I know, I know. Well, I'm very honored to have you on the podcast, Gervasio. Let's dive right into our topics. And the first topic of discussion is about the political situation in El Salvador. So, the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, has been publicly viewed as an extremely popular leader. Though he calls himself a cool dictator, and he is quite young, it doesn't stop his popularity being re-elected in 2024 with almost 85% of the vote, something that we don't usually see in modern day politics. However, there has been extreme critique regarding the legality of his re-election, as a candidate should not be eligible for immediate re-election. So, Hivasio, can you please begin by stating why you believe Bukele is so popular in El Salvador?
Okay. For those who haven't noticed yet, Nayib Bukele is basically like a phenomenon right now in the politics in the world. He's the president of El Salvador, the youngest one that we have ever had. It's probably the youngest one in Latin America and the one with the largest rate of acceptance among the population. When if initially started in politics, he was like 90%. He had 90% of approval from the people. And before getting into politics, he was a businessman. He was entrepreneurship. He has many companies. Because his dad came, he was who had Palestinian origins, came to El Salvador, and he inserted like a lot of companies. He started business here, and he became rich. He rapidly became part of the oligarchy, and then he get involved into politics. So Nayib Bukele, the son, our president, he also followed this path. He initially started as a businessman, and then he went to directly into politics. And even though he was already new because of who he was of the family who he belonged to, he never had this popularity until he became to politics. And I think the reason was not because of who he was, but the image that he portrayed to the people, to population. So basically, I think he took advantage of the political, all the domestic actually struggles that El Salvador had to portray himself as the solution for all the problems.
Hmm.
Just a little spoiler to tell you because I want to address this later. is just basically, first of all, the political instability. El Salvador lived in a civil war from 1980 to 1992. And the problem was that the same wings that fought in this civil war were the same political parties who ruled the country for 30 years. We have
Mm.
the left and the wing. The left wing was the FMLN political party, which stands for Farabundo Martí para la Liberación Nacional,
Oof.
which translated will be like Farabundo Martí for National Liberation. And then the other one is Arena, which stands for Alianza Republicana Nacionalista del Salvador, which means National wait, Alianza Republicana, Republican Alliance National, something is complicated to translate. But we had the left and the left and the right side, and they basically ruled in a kind of switching structure. So basically, here the presidential period is about 4 years, and just imagine the left wings 4 years of presidency. They start to launching reforms, and then after those 4 years ended, then the right wing get into power. And then because they were like enemies, they were just like the new coming wing will just start to stopping all the reforms that the previous 4 years wing had launched. And this created a cycle in a kind of way that the El Salvador, the country, never advanced.
Mm.
So basically, it was like a fight between them. This was a political instability, apart from corruption, because there were like very corrupt presidents we had. There was one called Mauricio Funes, who basically stole $80 million, and then he flew out of El Salvador. He went to Nicaragua, and since then he's enjoying his $80 million there.
Wow.
Um, yeah, kind of sad.
Mm.
So then after that, we have the economical struggles. So basically, high rate of unemployment, inflation, lack of opportunities, right? Also in 2001, we changed from our official currency that was El Colon, and then we changed to USD dollar. This in order to maintain a kind of balanced economy, but made us also kind of had some dependency on the US. And the problem with that is that El Salvador is a poor country. We're still developing, and having a such expensive currency makes everything so much expensiver. So people cannot manage to buy the stuff that they need to survive, and the minimum wage is not helpful at all. At the same time, we have the insecurity problem. We have the gangs. I'll try to address that later, but just imagine that you constantly live with the fear of being killed in the streets, because basically gangs have control over the country, and they are gonna make whatever they want because there is no political figure or power figure that can control them. So basically, the people saw these struggles in the country. We were going down. We have political instability, the economical struggles, insecurity, and they saw how they were voting over and over and over again for the same people, for the same political parties, and they never solved anything. So I think people just started to look towards more radical parties that, even though they didn't have the experience as the ones that they were before, they might probably have or come with better solutions. They saw it like a thing of like, I don't have anything to lose. Like I'm already losing. If I vote for them and they don't do anything, I won't lose anything at all because I don't have anything right now.
Mm.
So I think Nayib Bukele, the president, just like took advantage of that situation in order to portray himself as the solution, and that's how he uh, gained some popularity among the people. Um, Also, some stuff during his career as politician is the fact that he literally used and abused of media.
Mm.
He used the social media as you don't have an idea. The thing is that the other political parties, they just focused on elder people, people who suffered the civil war, and people who lived it. And now, what were the purposes of these parties? So they would target these people by making TV announcements or making radio announcements. But like nowadays, we don't use radio or TV. We use Netflix and Spotify,
Mhm.
or like,
Times have
and
changed.
on the other, yeah, people change. And then Nayib Bukele came, it was like, I'm gonna target youth and I'm gonna go for TikTok, for Instagram, for Twitter, and like all the elder people doesn't know how to use it, right? But youth people does, and youth people is more than the elder people, because technically the country should be should be developed in a way that benefits the youth, right? Because they're the ones that are gonna live in it. So yeah, he targeted TikTok, he targeted Twitter, he was publishing everything. He was like, I don't know who his propaganda minister or like helper is, but like he's like the next Joseph Goebbels. He yeah, he basically did everything for that man.
Wow.
He made the population to be always talking about him. Like he was always doing something, so people had something to talk about him. And
Mm,
like he became such a popular phenomenon, and then people just started voting for him. Um, so yeah, I think he just used that image and exploited it in the social media. So that's how he actually gained so much popularity. And also I think is the fact that he never cared about the rule, but he cared about what people said.
mm,
Because like for example, the Declaration of the Human Rights, there is a there is an issue right now about how to address the gangs and how human rights should be applied to these gang members who actually killed. Like, should gang members be killed just by the fact that they kill other people? And people say yes, but the Human Rights Declaration says no. But he thinks that if people agrees on something, then the Human Declaration doesn't apply to this case. So I think he just tries to convince people that he's actually hearing them and then they have the right and the power to choose over the country, as long as they don't have to pay attention to other stuff like declaration, human rights, or like constitution. So yeah.
he seems like some character, Gervasio. He seems, for those
Yeah,
who
no, he is
don't
such a character. He, the, if you go to Twitter, I don't know if he is still there, but like in his description says like CEO of El Salvador. The guy is crazy, actually. Like he's, I don't know.
yeah, I haven't
He,
seen
he knows.
a leader this young
Uh-huh.
in a while. There's not been many leaders this like
True,
young and
true.
kind of like flashy around. Yeah, he is some character, and I mean, I think what you've talked about El Salvador, it kind of really reflects a lot of what has happened in history in the past in different countries, and it just kind of says that history repeats itself, and we see it in El
Yeah,
Salvador.
yeah. We should address something about education. Like the ones who doesn't know their history, they are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah,
Because
that's right.
like I have seen it, but while studying history there in OPC, like I can see the similarities between other fascist and authoritarian states and the one that I'm
Just
living in,
yeah,
and it's just basically the same. It's just like I don't know, a path or like a series of steps that you have to follow in order to become
yeah.
a dictator.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing listening to him, thinking, wow, where does these type of trends and patterns familiar from? And I'm like, oh, that's from
Yeah,
Spain, and that's from Germany, and that's from yeah.
yeah.
So
This is-
one of Bukele's successful things was his crackdown on gangs. So this is one of the things that he got some praise for. But it's also clear that he's functioning as pretty much this dictator, and he's pretty open about being a dictator. He's controlling executive branches, legislative branches, judicial branches, all of these important parts of the state. So, what does this mean for democracy in El Salvador then at this stage? Do you think this is actually posing a threat to this country actually functioning?
well, I think it is in the way of democracy because
Mhm.
right now the country divides in three branches, right? The legislative, the executive, and the judicial. So the president, the Congress, and the one who applies the laws,
Sure.
and he controls everything. He controls the Congress because he has majority. He's the president, so he controls the which one, the executive, and then the judicial. Basically, the Congress and the president have the right to choose the judicials. So basically, he controls the three branches. Um, the problem with this is that there is no democracy at all. Like whatever he says is gonna be done because he launches tomorrow's a reform or a law, then the Congress is gonna pass it, and finally the judicial branch is gonna apply it. The problem with this is there is no like a counterpart to one ideology. So it's like he can do whatever he wants, such as the thing we have now that is unconstitutional re-election. The Congress intentionally they misunderstood the Constitution in order to him to be re-elected, but there is no one to stop him because he controls all these branches. And the problem is like if tomorrow he launches a reform of okay, I'm gonna be the president for the next 12 years, there is nothing to stop him, you know? Or
Mm,
like, or for example, the polemic of the Bitcoin. He wanted to apply the Bitcoin so bad, and nobody stopped him, you know?
mm,
So basically, I think that's the threat to the country's functioning. That
mm.
if he misses something, or he makes something bad, or he applies something, or he misapplies something to the country, we all go to hell because
No opposition.
yeah, exactly.
Mm,
In order to a democracy to work, I think there must be a counterpart, you know,
mm.
because that's democracy. You put two things that people want and you make them vote. But there is just only one, then
There's no
there is
vote.
nothing to vote. Exactly.
Mm. So another issue regarding democracy then is the crackdown on journalism, which is a really important part to actually revealing the truth. And so this includes like El Faro, which is a digital news outlet, that had to relocate to San Jose in Costa Rica because they couldn't function in El Salvador anymore. So why is Bukele and the government going after journalism, and what other civil liberties are at stake?
Okay. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, he basically, I think he reopened this ministry that is the Minister of Press and Propaganda. So I think it's translated like that. I'm not sure. But the thing is, um, they're in charge of publishing every single hour or probably every single minute if they can something that the government has done for the improvement of the country. They
Mm,
never they never publish something that the if the president of the Congress or the Congress have done something bad, they will never publish it.
mm,
Why is this bad? Because first of all, the people who lives in El Salvador, they live in a lie, you know. If there were no other medias, then they would just hear to those press and publishers, and then they're just gonna see that the government is good and good and good and good. And then people
mm,
internationally sees this and they will see that he's actually doing something for the improvement of the country when he's actually not doing it.
mm,
El Faro is a very well-known case that it was it is actually a prestigious press and news in digital news in Latin America. In all Latin America, they charged of complaining about corruption and authoritarian states. And the thing here is that they were publishing stuff like so much stuff against the government we have right now. They were publishing stuff like corruption, like nepotism, and the fact that they are actually not giving back like how you call it, the bills, like you know the state has to every single period of time they have to give to the people an estate where they say where the money has gone,
budget, the
so the
budget,
people exactly.
budget.
Well, yeah, yeah. So it's like they have to like give the budget, not that like the budget, but like where the budget has gone to, you know, like people has to know what like the country is spending on, and they are not giving that. And El Faro, this news, they were actually like doing by themselves their own research of like where is it going, what are they doing, and they didn't like this, so they just like starting to ban. This goes along with the something I will talk later, that is the estado de excepción or a state of emergency, in which you couldn't talk bad about the government because you were against the government, and everyone against the government is a gang member. So they were just like banned from the country, and I think they had to they were forced to relocate themselves to other countries and like make continue to continue making this periodism, but from another part.
Mm.
Yeah, you can barely talk bad about the country. First of all, because most of the people approves the government, and also if you publish and something curious is like if you publish something, for example, in Twitter, complaining about the government, you will probably lose your account in the next 24 hours because they have like trolls, we call them. That is fake accounts that basically just report your account because you are talking against the government. So it's crazy.
Mm. Mm. So you
Yeah.
brought up the state of emergency that El Salvador is in right now. And I think one of the topics a lot of people will be interested in talking about El Salvador is about gangs, which you've kind of mentioned, and gang violence is something that um, is definitely a big issue. So President Bukele launched a military operation, declaring martial law against the gangs that controlled the country, causing it a state of emergency. So while on the surface the issue became better, human rights groups, including Human Rights Watch, which is a big organization, reports the use of torture against arrested gang members, now amounting to over 80,000 who have been imprisoned. That is a very large amount of people. So, could you begin by contextualizing the problem of gang activity in El Salvador and what effect this has really had on not just political life but social life of El Salvador as well?
Yeah. Um, let's see. The gangs is basically like a huge problem here in El Salvador that comes since probably the Civil War. The thing is that the gangs we had or have still have people claim that we still have people's other that we already eradicated. Is that they weren't originated here in El Salvador. Their origins is in the U.S. by Salvadorian and Central American people who migrated illegally to the U.S. and they formed their own gangs there in the U.S. And of course, I guess police or like yeah, the police and the officers there in the US, they just like captured them and they deported them back to El Salvador. El Salvador by that time was still living the civil war, so there was like they were paying more attention to fighting the counterpart than actually fighting other stuff such as the gangs. This gives like a period of time to the gangs to actually gain power into the country and establish themselves. Once the civil war is ended, I think it was impossible for the government to eradicate completely the gangs because they were already well established. They have so much power, and they actually renewing themselves. So they apply this method of extortion, blackmailing people, killing. There, there are thousands of homicide and feminicides cases. They came up with something called rent, that is basically they they force people to pay in order to keep them alive. So basically, if you wanted to be alive by the end of the month, you had to pay a certain amount of money. So they didn't kill you. The problem with this, wait, give me a second. Um, so the problem with the rent, wait, let me see. Where was I? So yeah, so you had to pay a certain amount of money to in order to keep you alive.
Mhm.
Um, And the problem is if you didn't in a poor country with a minimum wage of 365 USD, if you didn't have to pay, if you didn't have the how to pay, you had to pay with your life or probably your daughter or your son. If you have a son, then he's gonna join the gang. If you had a daughter, then she's gonna experience violation by the gang members. Um, Also something they dedicated to was like drug and trafficking stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so the other problem is that the gangs also fighted each other because there were multiple gangs. There were not only there were like three main gangs here in El Salvador, and they had like a certain war between them of like trying to have gain dominance in the country. And as a consequence of this, in March of 2022, I guess, we experienced the most brutal weekend of El Salvador. They were killed more than 62 civilians in the country as a consequence of this direct war between the gangs. And it was like the trigger thing that 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 make Bukele to launch this operation known as the estado de excepción or state of emergency,
Right.
which was basically a plan of territorial control or like gaining territorial control from the state. So basically, they had the suspension of certain constitutional rights. You didn't have, well, you weren't warranted to have a freedom of association. You couldn't associate, like, reunite with your friends freely. Also, they could capture you just by the fact that you look suspect or part of a gang member. Many people who were tattooed, they were captured. Many people who were innocent, but they were seen as suspect, they were captured, and you didn't have the right to bring you in front of a judge or like to defend yourself in a tribunal
Mm,
until the 30 days of state of emergency ended up. The thing is that this state of emergency didn't went only 30 days. They extended it until probably 1 year or more. Also, the government invested a lot in military.
mm,
Soldiers were equipped with many tools, with many equipment. They had cars, they had many guns, um, and they were sent to the places where there were more um, gang members, or like they were condensed more the most. Um, so yeah, so they just like this massive arrestation of people started, and then there were censorship and mass restriction. I remember when it started, the state of exception, like the first week, for example, Friday of the first week, it was reported the first day without homicides in El Salvador, something that we have never seen in years.
wow.
Imagine passing from a like the day before passing from 10 homicides in a day to the next day zero, and the next day after that zero again, and the day after that again zero. It was until we finished the week and we had the first week without homicides in the country, something we have never seen in probably in the last century,
Mm,
because first we have the civil war and then the gangs, and then so yeah, it was like shocking first of all. And then many media and publish companies, they just starting to researching if there were actually murders or not, and many of them they actually found out that there were homicides, but the state wasn't reporting them, and that's where the censorship of the media started. That's why El Faro got banned, because they were actually publishing the truth, and the government didn't like it. And then finally, as a final plan of the state of emergency, was the creation of a massive prison called SECOT,
mm,
that stands for Cárcel no, Centro de Confinación del Terrorismo, that is the center of confination of terrorism. So
mm,
basically, it's a massive prison. You can look for it in images. It's called SECOT, CECOT. It's a massive prison where all the gang members are inside. Actually, any people who were arrested under the suspicion of gang member of belonging to or a gang is imprisoned there without the opportunity or the right to be reinserted into society. So once you enter there, you cannot escape. Many people there have 20 years, like in average, because they were like were young people who entered the gangs because they have to pay, because probably their parents couldn't pay the rent,
mm,
and then they are there and they don't they will be there until the lasting lifetime they have because they cannot be reinserted in the society. They don't have a plan to reinsert these people because the government has the ideology of once you're a gang member, you cannot change. You are gonna always be a gang member.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like you killed, you killed. And the problem, I think you mentioned also about the human rights organization, and they were triggered because Nayib Bukele once came out saying that he didn't care at all about the human rights of the imprisoned people or the gang members people because they violated the human rights of the civilians of the society because they killed, they must be killed. You are not protected because of this organization. You kill, you should be killed. And he actually like sent a message to them directly saying that if they kill a civilian more, all the gang members in prison wouldn't have a, not even a piece of rice to eat in prison, so they will die until starvation. So then that was when like the organization, the human rights organization, were triggered out, and then Nayib Bukele called them out also saying that I don't care about them. If you want them, you can take them. I can give you two if you want. And they were like, yeah,
Wow.
this like
Yeah.
forcing stuff of the human rights organization.
Mm.
Yeah,
I was just searching up the Seikart thing that you were talking about. It looks horrendous. Like
yeah, it does.
it looks terrifying. It's literally in the middle of nowhere, nearby just nothing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's in the middle of nothing, and it's probably the I think it's the largest in Latin America, probably. I'm not sure, but they were like when it was created, the aim was that to make it the biggest as possible, to have the record of the biggest prison in El Salvador. And there were like you mentioned 80,000 people in prison. Calculate that 20% of them they're innocent. There are people who were just captured in the state of exception, and yeah,
So yeah, I mean, there's so many like layers to this problem and issue, and like you've mentioned some limitations to the government's approach to crackdowns on gangs. Um, what do you think are the possible solutions then at this stage for this issue?
look, um, the thing is, the thing is like just ask yourself if there was other solution that will make this crackdown as fast as possible as it was, because it is easy just to like invest budget on your military, declare war on the gangs, and then capture whoever you think is a gang member. That way, it's easily in about 1 year, you will capture every single gang member until you eradicate it on the country.
That's true, yeah.
But like the persecutions or the consequences of this are not as ethical as they should be. Other solutions will be like um, have educational plans, like insert more education to the country because
Mm,
most of most of the reasons why people or like young people enter is was because they didn't have education or they didn't have or even if they did have the education they didn't have opportunities in jobs, so there was a lack
mm,
of jobs. So it would be like a combination between giving them education and also creating job opportunities so they don't get involved into the gangs. Um, but the problem is that how long it will take you. It will take you 30 years, right? Approximately. And the homicides and feminicides will continue to happen.
mm.
In If you had to ask me if I had chose the education, yeah, I rather the education, but should I don't know. It's like about thinking critically because it's like
Mm.
should those 10% people who are imprisoned um as much as value as like are better to imprison 20% of like 20% of the population that are in prison are innocent. Is that
Mm,
better than actually letting people kill the civilians for other 30 years until they reach the
mm,
perfect education and opportunities?
mm.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's a big moral and ethical dilemma, I think.
Yeah,
Lots of
and that's
states, about the crackdown on crime,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
and what's the
like
right way to do it.
you have to be the pros and cons. And the problem now is that this phenomenon of states of emergency has been taken as an example for other Latin American countries. There is something now called the Nayib Bukele phenomenon that is
Mm,
basically replicating this state of emergency in other countries. For example, there is the case of Peru, of Ecuador,
mm,
and I think probably next is Argentina, which they have their problems also with not with gangs but also with trafficking stuff. So they want to stop that because like trafficking and drugs is it has been such a huge problem in Latin America, and they
mm,
want to replicate in the countries to have the same results. The problem is that in the example of Ecuador is that they tried to apply the same, but they created a civil war which ended up with more kills than like with much consequences of killing civilians than results.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's something that we're gonna have to be looking out for, and um, yeah, it's so complex in its nature, and as
yeah,
much as we want no gangs in the country or no violence in the country, the violence is really the issue, isn't it? We want to have
it's
the absence of violence, but in order to
like
achieve that, there's so many sacrifices that people need to make.
yeah, they have. It's just like I think the achievement is like to stop violence, yeah, to stop killing people,
Mm.
whatever it takes to. I think
So
that's the vision of
another, sorry, yeah,
the government. Huh?
yeah. So another key issue regarding gang violence is the issue of femicides, and you've touched upon it earlier. There was a Vice media report. I'm sure that people in our school has reached out to you about that, right? After they saw it and they watched it with you. It
Oh
has
yeah,
gained a lot of international attention. It was probably one of the more powerful documentaries that I have seen. Definitely really eye-opening to the crime of killing females because of their gender. That is the definition of femicides. And I know
yeah,
that, people in our community, when they saw that documentary, a lot of them went to Gervasio because they were just so interested in what this was. We have kids doing their EEs on this. Yeah, it's a I'm glad that it's getting the attention that it needs. So, hearing from a El Salvadorian first-hand account,
yeah.
why is femicides such an issue in the state? And more importantly, why are so many of these cases like not reported and very few leading to actual convictions?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, well, as you mentioned, like I'm glad that people is actually getting interested in El Salvador and the
Mm,
issues they're passing through.
mm,
I never expected actually. El Salvador is like a very little country. Like
that's right.
for centuries, it was never paid attention that it should have to. And nowadays, like I have to inform myself because people is asking me, and like sometimes I'm also don't know about my own country.
Mm,
And when I saw that Vice documentary, I was shocked. First, because they published it recently, but it was actually taken from 2015, I guess, is actually
mm,
when the gangs were actually on their peak. And I never saw this attention towards feminicides because, first of all, here in El Salvador, they never count them as feminicides. They most of the time they just count it as homicides.
mm, mm,
It's just like if someone is killed, it's always a homicide. They never they read barely said in the news like feminicides and stuff until I saw that documentary that was actually like pretty much this culture in El Salvador of like not paying attention too much towards the female role in society. And I think this is because a machismo culture is called. I don't
Mm,
know why in El Salvador, and I've seen it. Probably I have seen it more in my grandparents, um, and great grandparents, of course. That this they have this of ideology, or like, I don't know, culture of seeing the women as a servant,
mm,
as something that goes not like is balanced with, like, we have the husband and the wife, but the wife is always a servant. It's something down that is under the husband, and this machismo culture is seen in so many families. For example, the dad, like, actually hits, punches the mother, and this is like, there is aggression, there is physical aggression, and not also physical, but also psychological and economical, because here is really clear that the man wins more, has like wins more in the job than the women, and that also creates some violence. And the thing is, like, that violence is transmitted also to the next generations, to the sons, to the daughters. The daughters grew up thinking that they must serve to their husband, and the husband and the sons grew with this thing that is like, she belongs to me, she serves to me.
mm, yeah.
um yeah, the thing is, you can see this um undermine culture towards the women, not also in the family, but also in many other things. For
Mm,
example, here in El Salvador is very controversial that we don't have abortion laws. We don't have reforms that protects the women in case of abortion. Like, we have gangs, we have violations, and most of them get pregnant. There is no they're not addressed the way they should be addressed, and they just, like, yeah, have the baby. And yeah, it's very, I don't know, it's very gross, it's very bizarre, talking about uh, women's here, because most of the time, as gang members, there are also structures in this thing in the gangs, because in the gangs exists this culture of haiba. Haiba is how you call the wife of a gang member.
mm,
And gang members are always, but all like, not always, but most of the times are men, and they are the ones that have the guns. And if they actually, is like very shocking in the documentary when it says, I think it says, I just got tired of her and I killed her.
mm,
Yeah, it's like seeing women as an object, and like you can get rid of her whenever you want, has led many many feminicides in the country. And I
mm,
never seen, like, I don't know, like, education toward this. Like, in the
mm,
schools, there is no, like, education of how to live well in society, or how to respect each other, it's just like, education is bad already, but they never focus on the real issues, like they should address. They, like, the government is more invested on having propaganda on education, because most of the public schools here in El Salvador, they have to glorify the regime,
mm,
but they never address the fact that they should respect women, or like, women also have right.
yeah.
And it's very shocking, actually. Some curious fact, not related, but El Salvador has the first woman. We have never had a president, like a female president,
Mhm,
neither a vice president, and the roles that women take in politics are like nearly zero, because there are
mm,
like just few of them. And but El Salvador was actually the first country who had a woman who was running for presidential candidature.
wow.
She didn't won, but like, that was like in 1940s,
Mm,
So how do we pass from that to nowadays? Like,
mm,
women is totally, yeah, totally seen as an object, not respected. And yeah. there are female power movements in the recent years, but like I see probably like very hard to reach that state we were back in the time, or like to be compared to, for example, European countries or like any other power in the world.
Right. Yeah, I think that this is such an eye-opening issue. Um, Homicides is one thing. Homicides is evil in itself,
Yeah.
but to kill someone based on their gender alone and the status that brings, people, it's a whole new level of just violent and horrific, really. And I hope that anyone who listens to this does watch that Vice Media report, but then also does their own research afterwards to understand this
Yeah,
issue on a broader level as well.
yeah.
Of
Something
course,
to
this is
add is
something that, yeah,
yeah.
happening
I
in El
just wanted to
Salvador.
uh-huh. Go go go.
Yeah. It's
No, the thing is like we have I don't know why there is I don't know where it comes from, but it's probably given from the education we receive at home. There is like
Mm,
um, it's also in Latin America, but it's like this huge sexualization towards women.
mm,
I think we should change that because that had led us to many feminicides, many girls who were just alone, for example, in the road at night. They were just killed, violated, and then killed just because they were girls.
mm. So another kind of issue associated with gang activity is the result of poverty and such high poverty rates in El Salvador, with around 26 to 30%. So that's almost a third of the population living under the poverty line. So, what other factors have led to high poverty rates in the state, and what action has been done or needs to be done to address it?
Okay. So basically, yeah, gangs. I think it is something in between the gangs and the government. The gangs that are actually like managing to concentrate all the money just for them and not leaving anything for the people, and then the government who has been corrupt.
Mm,
Gangs, as I told you earlier, they have always have this thing rent that is basically just going and basically asking for money, or like you have to pay so have they don't have to kill you. They use this money to improve themselves militarily also. They buy their own guns, they traffic their drugs, they have their own commodities, they probably have a if well when they were in capture in probably I don't know, it's a very serious topic to talk about if they're actually being captured or not. There are people saying that there are still people who is they're free. There's still gang members who are they're free doing their own stuff. Um, but if they are or they were, they probably had a better house than me because they have so much money. They could pay it and
mm,
stuff. They have better car than me probably. Um, and then the government that also negotiated with the gangs. The previous government there and even the one now, they have like popularity because they negotiate with them. They basically give them huge thousands, like millions of dollars, just to them not to kill people. It
mm,
was like a pact between them. Um, this created like, and also also the government that wasn't addressing the real issues that are economics. Back in the time, they tried to change from colon to the USD.
mm,
Well, they just like make stuff much expensiver. The minimum wage is 360. That's not enough for no one to survive.
absolutely not.
Not, yeah, it's not. And even if you have a family, like you're like, what you wouldn't spend on just paying your rent is most of the money gone.
Mm,
Um, yeah, the government not doing anything, the guns managing to grab all the money from society. Also, I guess we should take into consideration other stuff such as the vulnerability we have from natural disasters. El
mm,
Salvador, well, Central America is also a place in a country with a lot of hurricanes, tropical storms. We have earthquakes. We probably have one earthquake per month. If we
mm.
are lucky, we have probably four. Um, and yeah, that also makes some money to go away, in infrastructure and yeah, deploying militarily so they can manage to make people so to make them they are sure or like safe wherever they live. And yeah, I think it's a combination of multiple factors of like environmental factors, political factors, the gangs factors. Economic is not going up as we can see.
Mm,
Actually, I want to talk about something that has happened earlier,
mhm,
like I think it was 1 week or 2 weeks ago. I don't remember,
mhm,
but Nayib Bukele, the president, de declared the war on despotism, declared the war on corruption. So he declared the war on gangs, but now he's declaring the war on those who are corrupt. So basically, he's trying to target those politicians who are like making money laundering or they're stealing from people.
mhm,
Um, the ones that are now, the ones that are gonna be then, and the ones that were in the past. There are multiple politicians who already run away from the country because
mhm,
they're fear from the life because they will be targeted of like corruption and stuff. And then something I think I can get the clip or like you can get the clip, but basically he says something dumb like uh, I will say stupid. And the thing is, like, we recently passed, or like, all America right now is passing through a hurricane season. Like in Mexico, Central America, we're passing through hurricanes, and we
mhm,
have like struggles on the crops. Like we're not producing enough crops to fulfill all the necessities of all the countries. And then this guy came like that problem makes the products to be expensiver than they were before. And then this guy came and said that if by tomorrow the people who sells in the markets doesn't lower the price of the products, he will be the one in charge to put them inside a prison, similar to the Secot. But now that is specifically for people who are corrupt or are making money from things they shouldn't do money from. Like they're getting advantage from people poverty. And that's really, really crazy. Um, we went to the market, prices are as the same as they were before. Nothing has changed, but like the fact that the government tries to look economical solutions on just putting people in prison is just ridiculous. Like
mm,
you're not gonna solve the country just by putting people in prisons. You must do stuff like economical plans. Right now, houses prices are going up because the propaganda has reached so fast the international media that people from like is um, people from other countries are coming to the country just to spend money here, and they're like coming to buy houses to buy stuff, and that makes much expensive the stuff. People like local people cannot live anymore because the people from outside are coming and buying everything, and that like make it yeah expensiver. They cannot buy houses anymore. Actually, Mr. Beast has to came to El Salvador to give some houses. You can look it on YouTube. I'm not kidding. He came to El Salvador just to give houses because there
Oh, that's right. Was that El Salvador? That was the video that they just
was
did.
Jamaica, El Salvador, and Colombia, I guess. But yeah,
Oh, that's right, because I saw the part of Jamaica. I didn't watch the full video. But yeah, they came
no,
to.
no,
That's right.
yeah, no,
Right.
it's just like people cannot afford anymore in this country because it's just expensive, and people from international countries are coming just to spend stuff and making stuff more expensive. We have a
Mm,
minimum wage that is not changing. We're supposed to survive, and yeah, it's crazy. They should apply like better plans on how to make local people's life easier in terms of economics.
mm,
Because like right now they're just facilitating the people from outside to come and yeah.
mm. So one final question I have. This is detached from all the other topics. is you mentioned this earlier on, but I think we didn't really talk in depth about it. So El Salvador adopted the Bitcoin as a legal
Yes.
currency in 2021, and I believe it's the first country in the world to
Mm.
allow Bitcoin to be a legal currency.
Yeah.
I don't know how to rephrase
Mm.
this question, but why and what does this mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we are the first country in all the world. We were the first country in adopting Bitcoin as an official currency back in 2021. The country adopted this currency without asking population. Like
Oh.
the president was like, okay, starting from the next like in the next 2 months, we're adopting officially the currency, the Bitcoin, and you like it or not, we're adopting it. What he was like trying to achieve is to gain some tourism in El Salvador. So basically, El Salvador is like a very like we depend very like on crops and tourism. People who come here to visit the beaches because we are like very famous because of our waves and like surf and stuff. And actually, he he named a beach as Surf City in English, Surf City.
Mm,
And basically, the what it aims to is just like international people to come and spend their bitcoins because there is not like Bitcoin when it was first launched. Like you buy it, but you didn't have where to spend it. You know.
mm,
But then this little country now, where in Central America came out with Bitcoin as an official currency, they then like people feels like tempted to go and actually try. You can like I'm not kidding. You can go to McDonald's here and pay with Bitcoin.
that's crazy.
Like you're gonna buy a burger in 0.000000256 Bitcoin, but you can buy it. Um, so basically, they adopted without asking people, and they also buy some Bitcoin for the state. So the state had I don't know how much they bought, but it was like 80 million Bitcoin when it was on its peak. Like few months later, it has like the a dramatic decrease on Bitcoin. It went from 61,000 dollars one Bitcoin to 16,000. You know, like
Mm,
it went to nothing, and that also affected the economy, right? Because our literally our money disappeared. Like it went nowhere.
mm,
Um, so yeah, that was its aim. Right now, I can tell you that it worked for people from tourists. It worked people who came who comes to spend their money. It's useful, but for us, we're still using our USD
mm,
because either we depend on the US or we depend on cryptocurrency that is controlled by the society who hell knows who that society is. But yeah,
mm. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Gervasio. Are there any last words you'd like to say about any of the topics or any ways that youth can make an impact or difference?
sorry,
Hmm?
can you repeat?
Oh, yeah. Are there any last words you'd like to say about any of the topics we discussed? Or are there any ways we as the youth can make an impact or difference?
Yeah. So basically, if you like this podcast, please give an Alex a like. I think he deserves it. I know he's like very invested with this political stuff, so he deserves it. I'm like pretty much glad to talk about my country and like share about the situation we are living right now.
Mm,
Um, I think the way you can make impact, whatever you are, is just like by informing yourself. Like, look as much as possible, many sources, different sources to get informed about El Salvador. Never, never go through the local periodics or like news and stuff because
mm,
they're probably like altered or like, yeah, they brainwash you.
yeah.
Um, well, yeah, if you want to know more about, just contact me. I don't know. I'm just called Gervasio. I don't know how can you look for me. I'm in Instagram as Gervasio Abarca. Um, so yeah. So thank you if you hear this. And hopefully it was like very fruitful for you
Yeah.
and for everyone. Yeah.
Mm. Thank you once again, Gervasio, for joining in this episode and representing El Salvador. This wraps this episode of the Youth Factor. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you look forward to the next stop of our journey. Thank you very much.